Welcome everyone to the sixth video in my series Learning C Sharp. Today we're going to look at controls and their events. So in this lesson we're going to look at controls, we're going to look at events, we're going to implement several events to demonstrate how they work inside Visual Studio, and then we're going to expand on our Calorie Counter application, and we're going to actually make the graphical user interface that we made in the last tutorial actually functional. So let's get started. Let me start Visual Studio. And what you see here, and let me fix this here. So what we see here is this is the actual GUI that we created in our last video, and it's a calorie counter, and we have a pane here for the user to enter their food, the calories, and the goal is to have them hit submit, and it's going to take the food and the calories and add it to this list box, and it is going to track the total calories in this box right here. So what we want to do today is we want to code this graphical user interface. But before we do that, let's talk about events. So each of these controls on this screen have events associated with them. So if I click on this exit button, and if I look over here and I make sure I have this lightning icon selected, if I look at this, you realize that you see all the different events that this control offers. So one of the most common ones for the click or for a button is click. But you see that it also has drag enter, drag over, enter. So let's in order to show events, let's start by coding the click event. So I'm going to hover over this control and I'm going to double click it. And what you'll see is that Visual Studio will take us to the code behind page, and it'll place us inside the method or the function or the routine that is going to handle, that is going to run every time that button is clicked. So you see here we have the name of the button, button exit, and we have click. And then by default this event sends in two objects, and we will get more in detail with these parameters as we need to. So for now, just to show how this works, let's say that when a user clicks this button, the exit button, we're just going to show a message displaying the fact that the message was shown. So I'm going to say message box with which, as you see here, is a class. It displays a message box that can contain text, buttons, and symbols, and form and instruct the user. So we're going to use this here. We're going to say message box dot, and if we go down here to this method called show, if we read the caption here, it says displays the message box in front of the specified object with the specified text. So we're going to say message box show, and as you see, the first method here accepts a string. So we're going to pass in a string to this method, and we're going to say exit button clicked. And we end the statement with a semicolon. Okay, so now what we've done is we've added some code or some logic to the button exit click method. And so when someone clicks that button, it's going to operate this code here. So let me run the application. Let me hide my icons here so it doesn't look so messy. And so here's our application. And if I click on this exit button, there we go. We get a message box here and it says exit button clicked. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to close this. And so in order to demonstrate other events associated with the button and to kind of give you guys a better feel for events, you'll see here, let's code another event. Let's say enter. And if we read here, it tells us what enter does. Occurs when the control becomes the active control of the form. Okay, so let's go to this code, and you'll see button exit enter, and let's throw another message box, and let's say show, and let's say button entered, and with a semicolon. So let's run this. Okay, so apparently this control, when the form starts, has focus. It's the control that's selected. So let's say okay, and let's go here, and let's tab. I'm going to tab down to that control, and you see how the cursor is moving from control to control. And I just tabbed, and it tabbed over to this exit button, and you see that we have button entered. So we're handling the enter event of the button. Now if I click it, I still should get the exit button click. So I'm still getting the click event. So what you see is that you can code multiple events for the same control, and your code is going to handle each of those events. So let's go back to the code, and let's do one more event just to demonstrate this. And let's say mouse hover. So if we hover over this, we want something to happen. So let's double click in the space right here next to mouse hovered. Double click here, and it's going to give us a button exit mouse hover method or function or routine, whatever you want to call it. And let's say message box dot show, and in parentheses, let's give it a string, and we're going to say mouse hovering. Okay, so now let's run our application, and let's see how this works. Okay, so since exit has focus when we start this application, you'll see button entered selected, or the message box will show. And let's hover. Let's hover over this button, and let's see if it's going to fire off that event. Okay, there we go. Mouse hovering. So it looks like not only do you have to, you can't just quickly go through the button, you actually have to hover for a few seconds for that event to be fired. So let's see, there we go. So if I put my mouse over the button and I leave it there, it's gonna fire off this event. There we go. And if we click, we still get the exit button clicked. So in this sample here, we set up 3 events for this button. We set hover, we set enter, and we set click. And that's a rundown of how all the controls work. If we go back to Visual Studio, if you click on any control, so for example the text box, all you have to do is click on this events icon, and this will give you an idea of all the events that you can code for that control. So give feedback, drag enter. So easy way to find out what the events are for a control. Every control is different. You know, they share a lot in common, but they also have, each control will have their own events and their own methods. So for example, if we click in the list box, you know, you'll see that this may be a little different. You know, there's a click. So pretty much all the controls will share a click method, drag drop, you know, and so on and so forth. So when you're working with controls, if you want to find out what methods you can code, you can just click on this Thunderbolt events icon and look at them. Another thing that you can do, and we'll do later on when we become a little more advanced, you know, you can create your own events for the control. So if none of these events are what you want, you can wire up your own event. That's a future series. All right, so we covered controls, we covered events. So now we want to make this calorie counter work. We want to make it functional. So we're going to code this so that it actually works. Okay, so the first thing we have a user do is we want them, when the application starts, we want them to enter food, we want them to enter calories, and then they're going to hit submit. So when they hit submit, we want this information to be populated inside this list box, and we want a running total of everything that they've submitted. So since I want I want to I want an action to occur when they click this, I'm gonna just double click on this submit button, and you'll see that it'll give me the button save calories, the click event. So here's where I want my code to go. Okay, so the first thing we want to do in this code is we want to combine what they've selected for the food and what they entered for the calories, and we want to combine that into one string that we can display in this list box. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say string input information. And this is our variable that's going to hold the information they put in those text boxes. So in our last tutorial, we gave all these text boxes names. So if I go over here and I click on the properties window, let's recall what this name was. For the food text box, we called it text food entry. And for the calories text box, we called it text calories. So let me go over here to the code, and I want to combine these two strings into one string. So if I go over here, I'm going to say input information equals, and this is where IntelliSense comes handy, and this is where our prefix comes in handy. We know that we gave those text box their names, we gave them a txt prefix so that we knew it was a text box. So now when we come in code, if I just type txt, you see that IntelliSense recognizes, it shows me those entries, everything that starts with txt in our solution. So in this case, it brings up txt food entry and txt calories. So I'm going to select txt food entry, and you see here it tells us it's a text box. And if I do a dot here, as we said, every control has property. So we want to get the property for this control that's going to give us what the person typed into the text box. So if I look through these properties here, I'm going to type a T, and that's going to bring me down to the T section. And I'm going to arrow down a little bit. And right here goes a property called text. And when we read the caption, it says get or sets the current text inside the system Windows Forms text box. So if I do text food entry dot text, that's going to give me the text that the user entered into the text box. So now I'm going to use an operator in C# that is a operator that can join two strings. So here's a plus. So now this, in mathematical expressions, this will add two numbers or add two variables. When you put a plus between two strings which is what this returns, text food entry dot text, as you see there, it says it returns a string. So if I'm going to add this string plus text food, and let's say text calories dot text, because I want the text that's in that box. Okay, so there we have it. So we've set a variable, input information, and we're assigning the variable here on this line, and we're saying what we want you to put inside this variable is whatever's in the text food entry text box plus whatever is in the text calories text. Now, one thing that I'll note is that when it does this, there's not going to be no spaces or anything in here. So we actually want to fix that now. So let's do text food entry text plus, let's put a string in here, but that string is just going to consist of a space. So it's going to add a space here. And let's do another plus, and that's going to add this. So this addition operator, when used with strings, is just going to tie them all together in one long string. And so what the compiler is going to do here is it's going to take this string, this empty space and this string and put it all into this variable. So so that we can just see this and make sure that we're getting what we want before we continue, let's actually show. Let's show what's in this string. And one way you could do that, again, the message box dot show, and it takes a string text, and since input information is a string, we can plop this variable inside this function, and let's say input information. Okay, so let's go up here, put information, let me put a comment. We're going to set the variable to hold the input information. We're going to assign the input information. Okay, information to the variable. And then here we're going to display it just to make sure that we're getting the right stuff here so that the program's working the way it should. Display input data. Okay, so I'm also going to take these out here because I don't want these to work. These were just sample events, so I'm just going to take these out. And we could still leave these stubs here because if we do need to code them in the future, we could just come back here and write the code, or you could take them out. So it's really up to you. And actually, I'm going to take them out because I don't want them to clutter up our code. So let me get rid of those. And then this, let me get rid of that for now. Okay, so now let me play this application. Let me run this application. Okay, so we got a message box here saying there were build errors. Would you like to continue or run the last successful build? All right, so basically when you get this box, that means something is wrong with your code and it can't run the code. So let me say no. Let's figure out what's wrong with our code. If you look here, this is an error list and Visual Studio will tell us what the errors are. If I scroll down here, it looks like it's trying to reference a label click. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's look at this code here. Okay, let's look over here. Okay, instances the designer cannot process unknown name button exit at line 56. Button exit. Okay, so let's go to the design here. Okay, so something really wicked crazy is going on right here. Okay, so let's go into the designer code. Click equals this label. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like, okay, what it looks like is, it looks like, it looks like, see, in the designer code, this is actually setting some of those events that we set up. And now, since we remove those from our form1.cs, it's giving us some errors. So let me just take these out. Let me actually take out these lines here. Okay, and let's go, and you see those, that took away those errors. So let me get rid of this last error, which I believe is right here. Okay, let me get rid of this. And hopefully that will, okay, so that's removed all the errors. Let's run this code now. Here goes we got our interface back. Okay, so let's run this now. Okay, so here goes our application. and we're going to enter food. So let's say I ate a banana, and let's say that it was 250 calories. So now what I'm expecting is I'm expecting to hit submit, and I'm expecting this submit to show a message box with banana space 250 inside it. So let's try this. Okay, and there we have it, banana and 250. So when we hit submit, we took the inputs, added them together, put them into a variable, and we're displaying this variable. So I'm going to say okay here. I'm going to exit this. Oh, I'm going to close this. Okay, so our code works. So this here we know works. So then we could uncomment out this line so that we don't see this message box when we hit the click button. And our next step is, after we have this information, we want to take this information and we want to plop it into this list box so that every time the user enters a food, we see it in this list box. So let's take a look at our list box. Let's find the name. And we see here that we called our list box LBX Foods. So that's going to come in handy when we actually code this. So let's go to the code. And what we want to do is we want to add input into the list box. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's type list box. Okay, so there goes our list box foods. Let's do dot. And again, we have a bunch of methods that we can perform on this list box. Okay, let's see. So let's say listbox dot items, and if we look at this caption, gets the items of the system Windows form list box. So let's use that. So let's tap to select it. And you see here there's another function called add. And if we read the caption, it says adds an item to the list of items for a system Windows Forms list box. So that's what we want to do. So let's select this. Let's put an open parenthesis. And it says here that we can add an object item to the list box. So we want to add this input information. So let's add that input information. And let's close it with a semicolon. So this line of code should add whatever the user inputs into the list box. And we're doing that by typing the list box name, period, items, dot add, and input information. So let's run this application and let's see if this works. Okay, so let's add a food. Let's say burger. Burger was 500 calories. Let's hit submit. And there we go. So now when we hit submit, instead of the message box, we see that this information is actually being populated inside the list box. Now what happens if we do this again? It's going to add whatever's in this list box or whatever in these input boxes into the list. So if we keep on going, we see that it keeps on adding burger. Let's say something else. Let's say we had fries, 550. Submit. Now we have fries. And what you see the list box does by default is that if the list exceeds what's shown on the screen, you get this nice little scroll bar here, and you can scroll down to see the complete list. So this is enabled by default. You can disable this, but in our case, it's good to have. Okay, so looks like that part's working. The part that we have to get next working is that we want to take this value and we want every entry to be added to the total calories. So I'm going to exit the application, and then our next step then is to calculate running total. because we want to know what the total amount is for all the calories that we entered. All right, so how do we do that? How do we get a running total? We know that the user is going to enter calories. We can get the text that they enter into this input box by typing text calories.text. What we want to do is we want to take that value, and if there is a value inside total calories, we want to add it to the value that they're inputting to get a new total. If the total calories is empty, meaning that it's their first entry, then we just simply want to add whatever's in this box into this box. And then here's where the conversion also comes in. Whatever the user enters into this box is going to be a string, so it's going to be text. So in order for us to perform mathematical calculations on it, we have to convert this into a number so that we can add the numbers together and then we could display the number here. All right, so let's take one step at a time. The first thing we want to do is we want to figure out if there is a value inside this box. And actually that will take a if statement. And we haven't learned if statements, so I'm not even going to check if there's a value in there. I'm just going to, when the user hits submit, I'm just going to have the code add this plus this and not do a check to see if this is empty. So let's see if that'll work. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare an integer that's going to hold the calories that are coming in from the user. So input calorie in, and let's set that to 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to assign that to whatever number is in text calories. So we're going to say text calories, or we're going to say calorie in is going to equal, and here's where we do some conversions. So I'm going to say integer int, okay, see, int dot parse. Now parse is going to let us convert a string into an integer. So I'm going to say int dot parse, and you see the first method here says we could give it a string. So I'm going to pass it the calories dot text. Okay, so there we go. So we declared an integer calorie in and we set it to 0. Integer is a number, and you see here a 32-bit signed integer. And we're saying calorie in is going to equal whatever the user places into the text calories text box, and here we're going to convert it to an integer. So our next step is that we want to add whatever, we want to get the value inside this box and add it to this total here. So our next step would be, okay, let's see, integer current total. Okay, so get input from user and convert to integer, and then we're going to get the total from the totals input box. Okay, so we're going to say current total is going to equal, that's the same thing, let's do integer dot parse, and let's do text total calories dot text. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to take whatever's in the total calories box, it's going to convert it to an integer, and it's going to assign it to current total. Okay, so now we want to do the math. Now we have our numbers, and now we want to get a new total calorie count, and we want to assign that back into the text calories box. So let's add calories. So we'll say new, let's define a new variable, integer new total equals 0, and then let's assign the new value, and let's say new total is going to equal the calorie in plus current total. Now, we really haven't talked about operators, but when you use a plus sign, just like when you use a calculator, these are two numbers, so it's just going to add these whatever value these two variables represent. It's going to add those numbers together and plop it into new total. So we've done the math. We've converted our text boxes to integers. We've done the math, and now our last step is to assign this new total back into that total calories text. So let's do that. Assign new total to running calorie box. Okay, so we're going to say that text total calories dot text. So the text that we want to put into that text total calories box, which is this right here as a reminder. If we look at the name, you'll see the name here is text total calories. So what we want to enter back into this box is going to equal new total, which is the number that we added here, and we're going to say dot, and it just so happens that the integer has a toString method that will convert the numeric value into a string. So that's what we're going to use. So that's another conversion. So here we converted from text to an integer, and we use the integer.parse method. And then here we converted the integer back to a string, and we use the .toString method. So you see two different ways to convert, and there's actually a handful more, but these are two that we have in our example. Okay, so at this point, I believe the code is good. We're ready to run this, and the program should get the input from the user. It should calculate the total, and it should show the total in the total calories box. So let's run this application, and let's try it out. Enter food. Let's say pizza. Say the pizza was 500 calories. Let's hit submit. Okay, so what we have here now is we have a error, and this error broke our code. So this is what we see here. So let's say break. So when you get this error box, you have two options. You could break or you can continue. In our case, we want to break because we want to see what in the code is not working. What did we break? We'll say break, and what you see here is this is the line. The highlighted line is where the break happens. The reason the break is happening is because if we hover over text calories.text, it gives us the value. So you see those two empty quotation marks here. This is the value. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to parse an empty string. So the computer doesn't know how to parse an empty string. What it's expecting here is a string that contains some sort of number, whether it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3. But what it can't do, in that case, if this was a 3, it could easily parse that and it would give us back a number here. But since it can't do that, we get an error because it doesn't know what to do. There's no way that it can convert this into a number that's going to make sense. So we get an error. So this is our first error in our program. Get used to these because you would get these a lot. Another thing to notice is the locals window. This window here tells us all the variables that are local to this routine that we just called. You see we have calorie in as 500, input information as pizza 500. It gives us sender, which is this. So this gives us a little bit of information, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's stop it. So right now I'm going to stop it. Up here there's this red square. It says stop debugging. So I'm going to stop this. And we have to fix this. We can't let our program break on us. So we have to figure out how do we fix that? How do we stop this from occurring? The way we could do that is we can use an if statement, and we can use an if statement to determine if this contains a value that we can add to. I didn't want to do if statements because we're going to do conditional statements probably in the next tutorial. But in order to make this application work, let's do that now. We're going to do an if statement, which is a conditional statement. And that if statement is we're going to say if this box right here is empty, then we don't want to add anything. We don't want to try to parse it because we know it's going to break. We want to set the current total to 0 so that we can do this calculation here. So let's do that. Conditional statement to determine if totals box is empty. Okay, so let's give ourselves a few lines here and let's say if and we'll go over conditional statements like I said in the next tutorial. So for this part just follow along, don't get stressed out about it. We'll discuss how this works in the next tutorial or in the one after. So for now we're just going to put it in here so we can get our program to work. So if and you give parentheses and inside the parentheses you're going to put your condition. So if, and let's say text total calories dot text dot, and if we scroll down here, we'll see a method that we can use. Let's say, okay, actually there's not. So we're gonna say here, so let me get rid of it. There's a static method to the string class. So if I type string dot, and you see here, I go is null or empty, and in the caption it says indicates whether the specified string is null or is empty. So that's what we want to determine. Is the string null or empty? So this is a static method we can call from the string class. And if I put another open parenthesis here, you'll see that it accepts a string value. So let me type text total calories dot text. That's the string that we want to evaluate, whatever is inside that box. And I'm going to close this conditional statement. And let me hit enter. And I'm going to put brackets here so that the compiler knows that whatever, if this conditional statement here is true, then it's going to perform whatever in between these brackets. So if this box is null or empty, if there's nothing in it, perform what's inside these brackets. Now, if this is false, if the compiler runs this and determines that there is something inside this input box, then it's not going to execute this block here. It's going to skip it and go right to this line. Okay, so this conditional statement in this case is either going to be true or false. If it's true, it operates inside the brackets. If it's false, it skips the brackets and goes to the next line in the code. All right, so if it's true, if that box is empty, we want to set current total equal to 0. So again, this is an operator, and this operator will assign whatever's on the right-hand side into the variable. So the current total will equal 0. And then here we don't do we need this? Let's see. So if it's empty, set the current total to 0. And then we don't want to do this, do we? Okay, so if it's empty, we set it to 0. If it's not empty, we just try to parse it. Okay, so I think okay, so that will work. Okay, so basically the if statement is going to check that. It's going to check this box here. And if this is empty, there's no value here, there's not a string in here, it's going to set the current total to 0. if, and then it's going to continue. It's going to continue on its way. Actually, if we leave this as is, it actually may cause another error because if it's empty, it's going to set it to 0. It's going to execute this code inside these brackets, but then it's going to continue and it's going to try to parse nothing, and then we're going to get the error again. So I think what we can do here, instead of moving this here, what we can do is we can set the text in that box to 0. So let's say text calories dot text equal to 0. Now, of course, there's oh, and wait, this has to be a string. So let me, because the text has to be a string. So, again, there are 100 better ways to do this, but for the beginner, this is how we're going to do it so that we can write the program, it's functional, and you can see how we can work around some of these issues. So this is not how we would write this in the real world per se, but for now this is going to work. So if we see that the text box is empty, we assign a 0 to that text box. And then it's going to come here and it's going to try to parse it. And if it finds 0, it's going to set this to 0. If it finds another number, it's going to set it to whatever number is in that box. All right. So let's start this. Let's play this again and see if we can get a working application. Okay, so enter your food. Let's say burger. Let's say the burger was 500 calories. Let's hit submit. Okay, so that time it worked. So it added our input to the list box. We have a burger, 500 calories, and we have now a total. We've eaten 500 calories today. So let's say we've also had some fries with our burger, and let's say the fries were 600 calories. Hit submit. All right, there we go. 500 plus 600 equals 1100. So it added our burgers, it added our fries, and we have a running total. So let's say later on the day let's say we had a piece of chicken. Let's say that piece of chicken was 921 calories. Let's hit submit, and there we go. So now we have a working application. It accepts input from the user, food, calories. We hit submit, displays it in the box here for us to see, and it gives us a running total for our day. So we now have a functional application that will count our calories for a given food. Now, as we progress through the series, there's a lot of modifications we're going to make to this application, but in our beginning phases here, this tutorial was to show you events, and I think that we were able to show you events with this sample program. As we progress through the series and we learn more about programming, more about coding, we're going to add a lot more functionality to this calorie counter. So at the very end, we're going to have a very spiffy calorie counter that we can use on our desktops, or, maybe at that point we could port it to a web application and throw it online. Um, but for now, we have a working application. So what I'll do is that's going to conclude this session. I'm going to put this on the website. I'll zip up this application. If you guys want to download it, take a look at it, you know, mess with it, poke around, change some things, and just try it out and see what you get. Again, if you think about things you want to add to this, if you've even modified, I'd like to see how you modified it, and if there are, for the next series, if there's things you'd like to see added, put it in the comment section and let's get a running list of things that you guys want to see added. And as we progress through our coding, we'll add in those pieces as we go. Okay, so what are we going to do next in the next video series? I have no idea. We could probably discuss operators. We could probably discuss conditional statements, if statements that we saw today a little bit. So I think that may be where we want to go next. We'll talk about conditional statements, discuss operators, and we'll probably add another control onto our form so we can start growing it a little more and start getting a little more in depth with some of the other controls. And of course, as usual, if you like the video, you can help me out by pressing the like button. If you like the series, you can also help out by subscribing. Also, if you'd like to make a donation or you'd like to go see this tutorial in written form, you can go to my website, www.mycodingsite.net/wiki. Have a good evening, and we will see you on the next tutorial.